Since anti-government protesters hit the streets in Venezuela 10 days ago, we've been tracking the media coverage of that story. What began as demonstrations over inflation, shortages, and a lack of jobs is now being characterized by President Nicolas Maduro and the media that back him as an attempted coup d'etat. Media outside the country tend to see this story differently. A 24-hour news channel beaming in from neighboring Colombia has had its path into Venezuela blocked on the orders of the president. Then Maduro threatened to kick CNN Español out of the country over its coverage. For all of the issues that Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez, had with the news media, this is the first time Venezuela has effectively reined in coverage from outside its borders. Both the government and the opposition have taken to Twitter to wage their media battle, but many of the images spread, mostly on the opposition side, have been exposed as fakes, either old or from another country altogether. His opponents accuse President Maduro of muzzling the media, but this isn't the first time Venezuela's democratically elected government has accused opposition news outlets of having an agenda that goes far beyond mere journalism. Our starting point this week is Caracas. On day one of the protests, Venezuelans looking for live, comprehensive coverage tuned into NTN 24. The channel is Colombian. VTV, Venezuela's state-run channel, had Nicolas Maduro looking presidential, working a crowd of supporters.
Some people died, and a lot of people were injured in Caracas and in other cities, but coverage was timid and slow. There were no explanations for this. I know that journalists and news channels have to verify information in real time before reporting, but that cannot keep us from doing our jobs. Journalism is about keeping people informed.
The only channel, foreign cable channel, that was broadcasting live this protest was taken off the air. So, really this is a problem because it affected the right of Venezuelans, all Venezuelans, to be informed, to access to important information. And I think it obviously affected the climate, the environment in which journalists and the media are doing the work.
Here is the government's response from a parliamentarian who deals with media issues in Venezuela.
The press in the country hasn't been objective or impartial. They have become opposition spokesmen. The international community should know that Venezuela is experiencing a soft coup, undoubtedly supported by the US. Also, the national and international media are manipulating information, saying that the government is lashing out on the demonstrators.
Those are the kinds of arguments many governments make when they clamp down on their media. Accusations of an ideological bias, conspiracy theories, and vague talk of manipulation from the outside. However, supporters of the Maduro government also argue that it's not paranoia if they really are out to get you.
It is very different to defend freedom of the press when you have responsible, politically neutral media outlets, and it is certainly not the case in Venezuela. Most of the privately owned media outlets are profoundly anti-government. There is also a clear precedent.
That precedent came in 2002. The democratically elected Hugo Chavez had been in office for 3 years, having inherited a media landscape controlled mostly by his right-wing opponents. Some news outlets, including TV channels RCTV and Venevisión, openly backed a coup against Chavez that led to the president's temporary overthrow. The coup leaders then went on those channels, thanked them, and said the coup could not have succeeded without them. It took Hugo Chavez 3 days to regain power, but Chavistas would never forget what happened, and the government then went to work redrawing the Venezuelan media landscape.
This has been years in the making. When the events of April of 2002 happened, the government of President Chavez at that time realized that the state media apparatus was very weak to challenge the influence of private media. And since then, they have built a prosperous state-owned media that basically censors any opinion or point of view that contradicts the government and basically broadcasts propaganda. And there were, till last year, only one critical broadcaster remaining in the air, Globovisión.
Now even Globovisión has changed sides. After years of clashes with the Chavez government and crippling fines for alleged violations of media laws, it was sold off last year to businessmen reportedly tied to the government. Cecilia Colmenares was an editor at Globovisión, but quit the day after the protests began over the blackout issue. She says she relied on the Colombian channel, NTN 24, for the kind of coverage she could not get domestically. Then that channel went to black.
That happened on the 12th of February. I remember because I left my office, went home to watch NTN 24, and all of a sudden, the signal was cut.
The president made that decision against NTN 24 as it was encouraging violent protest. A government cannot allow that kind of behavior. So we are monitoring many international channels, such as CNN and Español.
CNN, las 24 horas del día, su programación es programación de guerra.
And some of the big print media around the world who are trying to influence public opinion.
The government claims that NTN 24 were causing havoc. They were not. They were doing my job. As a journalist, I can tell you they were keeping people informed about what was going on. They were showing images that were not shown by any local channels.
So opposition leader Leopoldo Lopez's campaign has moved online. Activists have too, providing news images, not all of which proved to be real, and some even went mainstream.
Some of the images that were posted by media outlets were afterwards proven to have been taken from Greece or Egypt. Some were shown to have been doctored. The effect of these images is to mislead at best and or decontextualize a story.
The problem is that people have used social media to fill a void. They've noticed that local media are not doing their jobs. People want to be informed, and social networks provide them with an outlet. However, most of these people believe everything they read, which is not true. They're not journalists. They don't realize they need a source.
A decade ago, Hugo Chavez ran the government and the opposition had most of the media. Today, under Nicolas Maduro, the media playing field is still lopsided, but it's slanted in favor of the Chavistas. The Bolivarian revolution has transformed the country. The one thing that hasn't changed is when Venezuelans turn on their televisions. They still don't get the full story. They still don't really know what to believe. Our Global Village Voices now on the coverage of the story coming out of Venezuela.
Reliable information is very hard to find. People are inadequately informed in one of the most dangerous and uncertain times the country has ever faced. People are turning to social media and international news outlets to be informed. These problems have not received the attention they deserved on the media, and it's important that they do because they give meaning to these protests.
Censorship cases doubled in the past 12 years. There is less reliable information and more rumors, given that some people tend to share unverified information or pictures through social media. The economic situation has been almost entirely ignored since the protests began, and while protesters maintain media focus, we are becoming clueless about the central government's economic decisions and action.